Heidi ho, everybody. Before we get going with another episode of White Heat, just want to remind you about our friends at Mohawk Honda in the Scotia Glenville area of upstate New York, where they always go out of their way to please you. Yeah, the current supply and demand challenges in the auto industry, it makes this the perfect time for you to get top dollar for your vehicle, especially now that they're kind of in that tweener phase where they're kind of trying to move aside the 2021s and bring in the 2022s and all that jazz. And right now, Mohawk Honda, you can take advantage of the Kelly Blue Book Instant Cash offer. Sounds good, doesn't it? Well, here's how it works. Basically, they'll put cash in your hand for your vehicle the same day you come in. No waiting, no grace period. They give it to you right there and then, even if you're not going to turn around and buy a vehicle back from them. It's a pretty sweet deal, especially, let's say, if you're a recent college grad who could, use a more dependable vehicle than that which got them through college. Or, hell, if you're just a student right now that's in need of some extra cash to maybe, go towards tuition for your spring semester coming up in a couple months, or whatever it may be. Mohawk Honda has consistently kept their lot fully stocked with hundreds of pre-owned vehicles, a large inventory which makes shopping fun, which you can also browse all their makes and models to choose from on the website, so that way you can go in fully prepared for what you want to do, whether you just want to trade in or if you want to just flat out sell. You will know ahead of time. So make sure you stop and say hi to our boys, Greg Johnson, the assistant GM, Jake Hot Sauce Doyle, Luis, the VIP man Morales, and one of the many more tremendous sales consultants you will experience at Mohawk Honda, where they have a vast selection of Honda certified pre-owned vehicles. And now is the time to take advantage of the Kelly Blue Book Instant Cash offer Mohawk Honda in Scotia Glenville, where they always go out of their way to please you. Salutations, snack. If you don't get the reference, then you don't watch enough Robin Williams movies growing up. I'm Brian Cady. That's JJ Alexander. Episode 23 of White Heat. Woo, we got a lot to get into. We're presented by Godzilla Media. Sponsored as always by our friends at Mohawk Honda, as well as Johnstone Supply in Troy. So, first off, as far as the lack of a show last week, it was just weird enough where scheduling and then me getting sick all of last week, as you could probably still hear in my voice a little bit. I'm still a little bit nasally, but, we'll power through. Things got a little thrown off last week. A lot of stuff happening. JJ, before we get into breaking down how this show is going to go, how you been, sir?
I am maintaining. Still waiting on doctors to figure out shit. And in the meantime, just staying on the damn couch.
Except for this past weekend, because it was a busy weekend for you.
Yeah, and that's why I'm staying on the damn couch the rest of this week, because it took all of my energy to do what I have to do every Halloween weekend.
Smart man. So here's we're in a kerfuffle right now. That's my $2 word of the day, kerfuffle. All right, because there's the obvious huge topic that needs to be addressed. And then there's a lot of different stuff from all over the place. So here's how this episode is going to go. Obviously, I'll figure out the timing as we go along. But just to inform you, whether you're watching on YouTube or you're listening on tremendous channels like Google Play, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, whatever your streaming service of choice may be, we're going to open this show having a long-form discussion, because it deserves that kind of respect, regarding the news surrounding Ring of Honor. And then, depending on how we deem the timing, we may just transition right into what our usual stuff is, everything else, and make it all one episode, or depending on how long we go with Ring of Honor, we may split this into two parts. So we'll just kind of play it as we go along. So let's just dive right into it. It's here. I'll read the official statement in a moment, but I want to get your knee-jerk original reaction from when you. Well, first of all, I want to know how you heard the news, whether you saw the statement or you just heard it from third party, and then what your reaction was to it.
So I actually saw the statement literally about from the timestamp 2 minutes after Ring of Honor put it up on their social media. I just happened to be scrolling at the given time to see it right when it happened. Um, in all honesty, I'm surprised that with being backed by such a large company as they are, that they didn't do something like this sooner. Um, because it's not like WWE where you have this big like moniker of being the longest running show on television, blah 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 blah. Like Sinclair could have easily told their guys, you know, when the pandemic happened, listen, we can't have shows with people, and we're just for right now, we're just gonna close as it is. Um, more power to them for having done the empty studio show. It is not for as long as they have, but they kind of kept it going a little too long because everyone else started opening back up in Ring of Honor. Well, they did a couple of live shows, but besides that, they were still doing the weekly empty studio taping in Baltimore. And I think that hurt them. So I wasn't surprised by it. It still sucks. I also think that Ring of Honor as a company, like in its current form, like they should have done earlier is let people out of their contracts earlier. I don't think that they should have waited this long to be like, all right, come the first of the year, you're all free agents. I think they should have done that way back when and reconciled going forward.
So here is what the statement looked like, and it's, if you're watching on YouTube, you can kind of read along. So here's what the statement looked like. Quote, throughout the pandemic, our top priority was to keep everyone healthy and safe. And despite not producing any live events over 18 months, we were able to keep everyone fully contracted. We now find ourselves at a time where we need to make changes to our business operations and are planning a pivot for Ring of Honor with a new mission and strategy. The year will culminate with a final battle in December, and we'll be taking the first quarter of 2022 to work internally to reimagine Ring of Honor. ROH has the most dedicated fans in the industry, and we appreciate their loyalty and patience as we reconceptualize ROH. We anticipate returning to live events in April for the Supercard of Honor with a new fan-focused product and provide a unique experience for wrestling fans. Now, you already mentioned the part that they put out right away in the statement, that of the whole not having any live events, having it pre-produced, pre-taped in empty studios.
Right.
Now, so one would imagine at this point they're just going to roll the pre-tapes all the way until Final Battle in December.
Yes.
Why do you think it's just a matter of, because Sinclair is a a relatively big company? Is it just really a matter of maybe Ring of Honor being such an afterthought, for lack of a better phrase, that it just wasn't, things weren't executed in great importance relating to Ring of Honor?
Oh, I guarantee it. I mean, if you listen, Jim Cornette talks about that a lot because he was there from the transition from Kerry Silkin over to Sinclair and how Sinclair didn't know what they were doing. Sinclair basically purchased this company and then was kind of haphazardly lost on what to do with it. So it kind of like just sat on the back burner and no one thought about it for the past year because it was such a small line on the ledger that it didn't matter until they got until the freaking end of the fiscal year. And then they were like, wait a second, what is this? We've run this company for a year without, and there's no live revenue coming in, but we've still been doing the TV show. Like, what's going on? Like, and because like, especially if you watch it on wherever your network is that carries it, a lot of the commercial space is just filled up by, we'll be right back. There's ad space that has not been sold. And that was the big red flag that probably led to them being like, what the fuck's going on happening here? Also, and I'm going to be completely blunt and I'm going to try not to get too political into this, but Judging on the agenda that Sinclair Broadcasting has, I'm amazed that they were one of the first to have Ring of Honor stop doing live shows, because they really pushed forth, and their news organization really pushed forth big on the COVID is a hoax shit. And I'm surprised that they didn't just keep running shows.
Right. So, just to give you an idea of what Sinclair is comprised of, the company stations, um, most of the TV stations, I should say, are owned by the company outright. But they also operate through local marketing agreements or shared services agreements, typically affiliates of ABC, CBS, NBC, and Fox.
Right.
I know that in my area, it's affiliates of CBS. They work with CBS. They also work with the CW where I am, in New York. And of course, back when it still existed, UPN was one of those channels as well.
Right.
And the WB. Just to give you an idea of what else is involved with them, Sinclair Networks, which includes a bunch of sports-related stuff, including Bally Sports, which is really the jewel that's the growing asset within their company. It also includes the S Network, which is the New York Yankees baseball-based network, which is mainly comprised in the Northeast United States. Chesapeake Television, which is based in the Mid-Atlantic, obviously.
New England Sports Network.
Right, Nesson. Obviously, Ring of Honor is one of their equity holdings. And then a bunch of other business-related stuff that isn't really related directly to their television product, aside from like some broadcast equipment shareholdings that they have. But in the end, this is essentially, and I mean, obviously not everything is apples to apples, oranges to oranges. What this really is, it comes down to, this is basically a regionalized version, although if you could argue that it was the same thing for the what I'm going to compare this to. This was a regionalized version of what happened with WCW, in that they got, obviously it was a Turner run product, Turner. Then you have the AOL Time Warner merger, and everything became corporate from there on out.
Yeah.
Now that's not to say that everything became corporate with Ring of Honor, because it wasn't like Ring of Honor was, at least from the outside looking in, you can tell me if you think I'm wrong with this, it didn't seem like Ring of Honor was being forced to hire certain people into executive roles within their wrestling company.
No.
It was completely different. They were kind of left to their own devices.
Right.
But at the same time, essentially they did the polar opposite of what WCW did, instead of doing a compromise, in that when WCW was taken over by, when Turner's enterprises were taken over by AOL Time Warner, they became too involved, too hands-on with the product, with censorship of their product, which obviously led from them essentially being a TV 14 product to a TV PG product that was just, we all know what it was.
Yeah.
In this case, it felt like the polar opposite, where it was just a case of they acquired the entity, but couldn't have given two shits about doing anything to help it survive or even thrive. They just kind of let Joe Koff, and this isn't just to knock Joe or anything, or Kerry Silken or anyone else who was involved over time, but they basically left Joe and Kerry and them to their own devices entirely without any backing whatsoever. Right. So, to me,
and I think
it was like Ring of Honor knew what to do to not be like WCW, but accidentally fell back into being WCW in a way.
Right. I think what the grand mentality of Sinclair purchasing Ring of Honor originally was they saw a company that had already been around for over a decade, who had subsequently survived and thrived, and on a shoestring budget and with people in control who knew what they were doing, put out a consistent product that was always drawing houses no matter where they went, that was selling a lot of, that was doing a lot of purchases through their tape library, all that stuff. And they figured if we acquire this asset now, we can still let them go the way they're doing and they can build slowly, but they'll have the juggernaut of our company behind it to take them national. I think that was what the original standpoint was. And in a way, they would have gotten there over time, but they just were kind of slow on the brakes about it. And in the line, and then COVID happened, and they were just like, well, whatever.
It's just bizarre because I feel like. No, go ahead, because I'm still trying to gather my thought about what I want to say.
You're looking at a company that for the first 5 years of its inception was running shows in armories and the Rexplex in Elizabeth, New Jersey, and PAL buildings and tent shows, to once they got the backing, you're talking about a company that was able to run a very lucrative show in Madison Square Garden with New Japan Pro Wrestling.
Yeah, and okay, so that's kind of getting into what I was getting into, is that if there's basically what Ring of Honor did for about 20 years, they proved that there could be a secondary product that knows its boundaries, knows its limitations. Basically, they took the Paul Heyman model of wrestling, minus the extreme nature of it, obviously. But they took the basic frameworks of Paul Heyman as a wrestling entity and were corporately responsible with it, essentially, is the best way for me to put it.
Right.
They knew the limitations. They didn't try getting too big too fast. They knew the areas to aim for, as far as the buildings they went into, the cities they went into, and honestly, like, even though they eventually grew out and started going to places, and they went beyond just being an Eastern-based territory and went into like Illinois, and then went south into Florida and worked their way out to Las Vegas.
Right.
They were smart about it. It wasn't like they're going to Vegas and be like, "Oh, going to Vegas, let's fuck it, let's just do the Garden in the MGM Garden." They weren't. No, they were being very smart about it. I believe Sam's Town is the name of the location they were typically doing out in Vegas.
I think so. Yeah.
So they weren't like they were growing, but they weren't to a point where in their minds they were getting too big for their britches.
Right.
They were being very corporately and fiscally responsible. And that's why I think this came as such a surprise, because despite the empty houses because of the pandemic, I think people just assumed, because of how responsible they had been pre-pandemic,
that they'd always be around.
Right. And this is just one of those things where I think just got kind of taken a little for granted, I think.
Yeah. I think Ring of Honor, like, really is, if you look at the timeline, and I'll just, to be fair, I'll compare it to WCW ratings war era. You're really looking at the story of the tortoise and the hare. WCW wanted everything right away. Ring of Honor just was slow and steady, wins the race. And Ring of Honor was on that slow and steady mark, kept building. And I'm not quite sure where we would be right now if the pandemic hadn't hit. I think that was just that was like that variable that no one saw coming. That, I mean, it screwed up every aspect of everyone's life. But the way that things were handled by Sinclair when it happened were just like, that's where all the question marks lie.
And we'll approach, because there's an angle that needs to be addressed about this that we'll get to once, because what I want to do is I just want to break down part by part this statement, and then we'll dive deeper into it. But The one thing I will say that I think, like, the comparison you're making as far as the sense you're saying 96, 97, 98 WCW with ROH. It's the right comparison. The only thing I would bring up is that the 96, 97, 98 was so numbers focused from a demo perspective and so much about shock jock TV essentially.
True.
That's really what the late 90s was. Late 90s, early 2000s was shock jock entertainment, whether it was radio or television. That's how Howard Stern got so big. That's how Jerry Springer got so big.
I actually should have made a little bit more detail than what I was talking about. When I said ratings era, I actually meant 97 through 99, but also 2000, 2001 with the corporate takeover.
Right.
And that's what I was getting at.
Yeah, no, I understood, like, from a corporate perspective, I understood what you were saying. Product-wise, though, I would maintain, like, I would take, now, again, I'm not fully entrenched in knowing everything about early days Ring of Honor, but I would gladly take everything I would gladly take the 5 years pre-pandemic of Ring of Honor and put it up against anything WCW put out late 90s, early 2000s.
Mm-hmm.
Gladly. Because there was so much tomfoolery and bullshit going on, not even from a corporate level, just from a behind-the-scenes level, that you would never see in Ring of Honor. Just so much bullshit going on. Whether it was Bischoff, Hogan, Goldberg, Nash, just ridiculous bullshit.
Yeah.
But you never got that with Ring of Honor because, and this goes back to the good part of Sinclair not getting too involved with Ring of Honor, was that you always had people with good heads on their shoulders, knowing who were good hires and bad hires, and if they did sense somebody getting toxic, they never let it get out of hand.
Right. I mean, if you think back to the biggest blunders of Ring of Honor, the only big falling outs that you could see people pointing to were the falling out between ROH and Gabe and the falling out between ROH and Cornette.
Right. Cornette was, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but based off what I can remember, a lot of ROH and Cornette was a combination of Cornette. It was Cornette getting worn down, but he was worn down because he felt like he didn't have enough resources around him.
He didn't feel like there were enough resources, and he was dealing with a lot of egos. And he's never been quiet about who has had an ego that he dealt with there, who is still in the business to this day.
Mm-hmm.
But he still speaks highly of other people. Like, he still likes Kerry. He still speaks highly of Delirious.
Yep.
Like, so it's not like it wasn't like him saying I was the only good thing there and everything around me was shit. He gives credit where credit is due, but he pointed out the flaws.
Right. And ROH and Gabe, I mean, I don't know the entire story. Because Gabe basically jumped right from ECW folding to creating Ring of Honor.
Yeah.
And then
there was basically a falling out of creative differences because Gabe had other people buy in so he could build bigger. And then he kind of got edged out, and which is why Gabe went and created Evolve and Dragon's
Evolve. Right. Yeah.
And I mean, in the long run, look who ended up in the better situation. Gabe sold the entire Evolve library and the name to Vince and got a cushy job, and Kerry Silken didn't.
I know I said I wanted to break down the statement, but you bring up two interesting moments in time. So let's start from the furthest one back and come to the most recent. Let's go back to the Gabe thing. Let's stay on the Gabe thing for a moment. Hypothetically, we're going to supreme hypotheticals here with these two things I'm going to bring up. Let's hypothetically say ROH and Gabe are able to work out whatever differences they had behind the scenes. Do they get to a point? Obviously not. I mean, they're never going to get to. Let's just put this out there. We're not even going to bring up WWE in this conversation.
Okay.
Like it's a non factor.
Mm-hmm.
Do they get to a point though where they could become like the undeniable number two?
If Gabe had never left,
Yes.
I think that's a possibility, because just showing the way things went down afterwards with Gabe starting from scratch again with the new company and running it for 10 years and then it getting picked up. I think if Gabe had stayed the course with Ring of Honor, that eventually he would have gotten in the ear of a good financial backer, and it could have hit that. It could have hit that spot eventually, I think, honestly.
And here's the other end of it with Gabe, because you mentioned what happened with Evolve.
Yeah.
Again, hypothetically speaking, let's say he finds that backer you're talking about.
Yeah.
And the backer is not with the last name McMahon.
Yeah.
Do you think he ever gets to the point where he feels compelled to sell everything that was involved when he sold off Evolve to WWE? Or do you think at this point in 2021, he'd still be maintaining the product and not necessarily compete with WWE, but at least maintaining ROH as a reliable number two?
I think if he had stayed the course and that chain of events had played out, I think in 2021, I think Gabe Sapolsky would possibly still be a part of the company in an advisory role, or just depending on depending on the trust of said financial backer, maybe would have finally handed it off and been like, all right, I can stop working 90-hour weeks now. I trust where this is going. And I think that's what the big thing was. Like, that was because that was a big thing with Evolve, was like, because if you watch the documentary series The Wrestlers that came out a few years ago that Vice started airing like 2 years ago, there was a whole episode on Gabe and Evolve and how Gabe was still doing everything by hand, and how he was just like, and he said, like, if I find the right backing, like, I would love to be able to step away and just have a family life again.
Was that the episode where they had I want to say that was the episode where they had the whole MVP Sami Callihan kerfuffle?
Different episode.
That was a different episode? Okay.
Yeah,
I don't know why, but
I had a series downloaded.
I feel like I don't know why that I have those two episodes mixed up.
Yeah.
Kerfuffle.
No,
I said it again.
Yeah.
What are the day?
Yeah. No, the Gabe Evolve episode was where they really featured a lot on Keith Lee and Austin Theory, which, hey.
Oh, right.
Gabe always had an eye for talent.
Now, fast forwarding to the Cornette split.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like when you compare the two, because of Cornette's personality, that was the more inevitable of the two.
Yeah.
So I don't know if there's really ever a way to be hypothetical about that, because even if things are worked out then, I feel like, and this is me trying to bash Jim, because it's one of those things about his personality where it's endearing, but it's also maniacal at the same time.
Yeah.
I feel like his personality would eventually have worn thin people around him at some point. So whether it was at the point it happened or another year or two down the road, it was inevitable there would be a split eventually. So it's not even really worth trying to think about that hypothetically, as far as a long-term hypothetical.
On that. Yeah, my comparison on that has always been, if you look at Gabe Sapolsky and you look at Jim Cornette and the way they ran business, whatever, I would always say that Gabe is a star maker and Cornette is a star builder.
Yes.
Cornette is good at taking someone from the ground and building them up slowly. Gabe is able to get that eyeball right away and say, all right, I'm going to build a program around this person, and then I'm going to elevate it as. And the problem was, when Cornette came into Ring of Honor, Gabe had already made a lot of stars, but there were a lot of people who thought that because they were signed by Ring of Honor, that they were already made.
Right.
And they had an ego, and they gave Jim Cornette shit.
I think there's one guy that came to my mind as soon as you were saying the Jim Cornette end of that. And fuck it, I'll say the name because it's whatever at this point. I want to say Kenny King was one of those people at the time.
I'm not sure on Kenny King.
Because I remember Jim telling a story about when Kenny and Titus were still together originally.
Yeah.
And they were, I want to say they were in a program at that point still with, I want to say it was Shelton and Charlie.
Okay.
And Kenny was basically trying to play back and forth between Impact, which I think was still TNA at the time because of how far back this was. Right. He was trying to play big league between TNA and Ring of Honor, and basically he was basically being a dick in negotiations, more or less. And he was basically pretending he had this big deal on the table from TNA, and essentially said "fuck you" to Jim, left, didn't really have the deal he thought he had with TNA, and then essentially begged to come back.
Yeah. Kenny King, that you do a whole show on that. Kenny King has had a chip on his shoulder ever since he lost season 2 of Tough Enough.
Yeah.
Because he thought that he was made back then, and he was a runner-up on Tough Enough, and then nothing. You have to look back. That was over 20 years ago now.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Hold on.
When they first started uploading old shit to the network, I went back and started watching old episodes of Confidential. And the second episode of Confidential was all about...
Wow.
Yeah, I loved Confidential. That was my shit. The second episode of Confidential was about how the two chicks won fucking Tough Enough, and how the guys were like, the fuck, bro. And one of the guys who was the front runner was Kenny King.
That's fucking weird.
Yeah. Time flies, man.
Oh, here we go. Tough Enough 2. For whatever reason, when I typed in Tough Enough 2, it brought me to the album Tough Enough 2, which was weird. Oh, right. That's when Jackie Gator was one of the winners. Jesus Christ.
Yep.
Linda Miles. Who the fuck was Linda Miles? Oh, Shaniqua. That's right.
Yeah. She was Shaniqua and nothing.
Shad Gaspard was in that season.
Yep.
Hold on. Let's see here. Kenny, Matt Morgan. Oh, my God.
Yep.
Huh. Do you remember who the trainers were on that season?
DeMott was still on that at the time, right?
No.
That was later. Oh, who the fuck was in season 2? I was never big on the first few seasons of Tough Enough because I saw it as a complete fucking sham.
Al Snow, Hardcore Holly, Ivory, Taz, and Chavo.
Okay, yeah. Remember Hardcore Holly? Remember after the first season, chopping the shit out of Daniel Pewter.
Interesting. All right, so I know this is totally getting off guard, but just a couple notes about that season 2 of Tough Enough, by the way. Shad Gaspard was originally going to be one of the contestants of the Final 13 on the show, but failed a physical before taping started.
Yeah.
And then John Hennigan didn't make the final cut. He eventually won season 3, and we know who. I mean, we know what Morrison's done since then.
Johnny Spade, Johnny Nitro, Johnny Impact, Johnny Mundo, Johnny Ring of Honor.
And then other notable faces that didn't make the cut for that season and eventually got into the business and, for better or for worse, making names for themselves. Shelly Martinez, Awesome Kong, Jackson Riker, and Ken Anderson. Interesting. Hmm. Interesting. Eddie Hooser. Um. All right, so let's get back to the statement Ring of Honor brought out. All right, so they
Okay.
mentioned they're going to be going all the way up through Final Battle this year, and then taking the first quarter off to work internally to reimagine Ring of Honor. Um, and then they're going to reconceptualize Ring of Honor. If let's just kind of play fantasy wrestling here for a moment.
Mm-hmm.
Reimagine and reconceptualize. Any thoughts on what that could possibly mean for Ring of Honor?
So I think they will probably be more focused, especially with. I mean, it depends on who's going to be at the helm, obviously, because there's a whole different bunch of ways you can go on this. But I think depending on if they keep some of the familiar faces at the helm, what they will do is they will obviously bring back some of the tried and true people that they released from contracts. I think what they will try to do is be, for lack of a better term, next generation wrestling, where they will scour the independents across the country and try to find the new diamond in a rough and give them a chance and bring them in for 3 months to 6 months, try to build some programs to see if they work, pick and choose, and just have it be more of that. Basically, what 2018 NXT was. Whereas we're going to sign these indie darlings, but we're going to build them in our own image, and we're not waiting for them to get plucked by someone above us to have the slate just completely wiped clean. So they will go out and they will find people because, and I mean, it's to the casual fan knows really nothing about independent wrestling. And even people that follow independent wrestling, like they're familiar with East Coast stuff, West Coast stuff, Chicago area, Texas area. That's about it. There's so many untapped markets around the country where it could be like, we're going to send scouts and we're going to see if there's word going around and see maybe we can pluck this kid and bring him in for a hot shot. Pluck this kid, bring him in for a hot shot. See if we can build something around him. I think that would be a great conceptualization for them.
It. How should I put this? Basically, I like the idea, but I guess the question becomes hypothetically if they run by that format, let's call it.
Mm-hmm.
They run by that business model. That's the better way I want to put it.
Okay.
Are you talking going to a point where everybody's on short-term contracts, then depending on their performance and X, Y, and Z metrics, whatever they come up with, you're either renewed for another 6 months or you're cut, and then they just kind of reset from there?
I think so. I think that for Ring of Honor, the aspect of the 1 year or longer guaranteed money contract is no longer going to be viable. And I think keeping people on a rotating 3-month or 6-month contract is better as far as their bottom line goes. And it also gives, because Ring of Honor is one of the companies that still lets people go out and take indie bookings. I think that with a 3 to 6 month span contract, it would open them up more to be like, okay, I've gotten a little bit of exposure. I can still do spot shows. And then if there is an offer on the table, I don't have to wait as long, or I don't have to break contract. And it just might be beneficial for the talent and the company.
And they can still maintain the same model they had where, because you mentioned indie bookings, they can still maintain the same business model where they go to a city, pre-tape a few weeks to a month of TV, and then that gives the talent all that extra time to to book themselves out and make extra money
Right.
that way. So that totally makes sense. And then obviously you have hypothetically your one big show. Do you think they go the and I it's the only comparison I can think of off the top of my head. But do you think they go the AEW business model of just doing one mega show per quarter at this point instead of trying to force? Because at one point it got to there was a time where Ring of Honor was trying to pump out a super show every like month or two, and it almost felt
It was
forced, for
forced.
lack of a
It
better
was.
phrase. So I think I would say it would be more feasible if they went back to like one a quarter, which
I
would mean
think
hypothetically Final Battle, Super Card of Honor, Anniversary,
Mhm.
and I I don't know. I don't know what the fourth one would be off the top of my head,
Death
but
Before Dishonor.
oh, Death Before Dishonor. That makes sense. Yeah, because Anniversary. Yeah, because Super Card of Honor would be spring. Anniversary is usually summer. Death Before Dishonor. Yeah, okay, so that makes sense.
Yeah. I think honestly, if they work it well and they stick by them all of that and 3 to 6 month contracts and all that stuff, I think they would be able to sustainably pump out a big super show every 8 to 10 weeks and have 5, maybe 6 a year. And I think that would be sustainable for them. Just because Ring of Honor really, and that's one of the reasons why there was the downfall, was Ring of Honor was really dependent on their live crowds. Ring of Honor was never really about watching a streaming feed. Ring of Honor was
Right.
about being there.
Now you mentioned, since we're kind of getting into the business side of it with pay-per-views and feasibility of how many you can do and so on. Well, not pay-per-views, but super cards, we'll call them at this point, because
Yeah,
pay-per-view is really a non-existent business model anymore.
right.
Um, but it leads me to an interesting question that I feel like should be brought up, and we'll get into other potential issues that led to Ring of Honor shutting down temporarily. We'll get into
Mhm.
that later. But the one that I want to bring up, since you mentioned super shows, do you feel like the invention and growth of Fight TV hurt Ring of Honor at all? Because it allowed all these different independent companies with at least somewhat similar business acumen and wrestling belief and theory. It allowed them to get more mainstream exposure. Do you think it might have hurt Ring of Honor at all in that regard?
Not at all.
Okay.
Yeah, like Fight TV and IWTV, like they're there for the niche audience, but they're not like really eating into anyone's bottom line.
Okay.
It's basically I'm going to be completely. I mean, Fight TV not as much, but like IWTV, like it's if you've got a money mark with enough money, oh look, you can be on IWTV, but
Right.
doesn't mean people are watching your shit.
I mean, yeah, because the only reason I mentioned Fight TV is because, like, over the last few years, obviously, you know, AEW's gotten into it, but like even before that, we saw New Japan getting into it. Ring of Honor obviously is leaned heavily into it.
I used to
Um,
watch. I was watching Championship Wrestling from Hollywood on Fight
yep.
and
NWA has bought into it as well.
NWA, yeah, and but that was the thing, and like once again with and why I don't think it chips into the bottom line is because Fight and IWTV, like you can see the obvious difference in production value,
Oh,
and that
absolutely.
is a major disconnect.
Right. Um, so now we've come to that. Um, any idea? Because at the end of this statement, Ring of Honor also mentions fan-focused product and unique experience for wrestling fans.
Mm-hmm.
Anything noteworthy you could think of that could refer to, or is that just them bloviating and adding words to the statement to, I don't know.
I
Like,
think
I don't know.
So I think along with the lines of what I was saying, I think there's going to be a lot of fan interaction online, of fan input, and be like, oh, if there's someone who you think we should check out, fucking, tweet us and let us know, and we'll have interactive polls, and we'll do weekend fan fest when we do our super shows, and we'll do the autograph signings and the yada yada, and all the bells and whistles that Mania does and that fucking Starcast does and all that shit. I think that's
that's actually real interesting to bring up, because I feel like, how do I want to phrase this? All right, it's 2021.
Mm-hmm.
When you really come down to it, I mean, obviously WWE, they have a channel on TikTok, they have a channel on Instagram, they have this, that, or they have a channel on Snapchat, whatever. So they've embraced social media enough to the fact that, hey, we should probably have an account on this or an account on that or whatever. But I feel like aside from having a hashtag in the corner of the screen for every fucking match during the show, there's nobody out there really grabbing social media by the balls as far as fan involvement within the show.
Right. And there's a reason for that.
And occasionally you'll see like I think you see it more on the Bump than anything else, because that's a social media driven show. But or on their Talking Smack or Raw Talk, whatever the hell the other thing is. Like they'll scroll tweets once in a while. And it makes you wonder if they're real tweets or if they're fake tweets half the time, but whatever. But they'll have tweets, and that's about the extent of social media outreach you'll see made public during any kind of WWE programming.
Right.
Now, obviously, you don't want to go to a point where you have like a fucking fan interaction themed pay-per-view like they had with Cyber Tuesday back in the day, because that Taboo Tuesday, like, yeah, that whole concept was
it was a fucking work,
right? But I feel like if there's an avenue that could be capitalized on, this is kind of what you're getting into, I feel like. Again, I feel like nobody's really truly embraced and tried to capitalize on social media, even in 2021. I think if there's something that Ring of Honor could potentially channel into, that's one thing they can do.
Right. And I mean, the reason that companies haven't done that is because social media is an unpredictable animal. And to better expound on that, going back to old WWE, if you remember the show Livewire, where it was a call-in show on Saturday mornings, and they didn't screen the calls, and they had quite a few issues. That was the beginning of the interaction on social media. So what happened was, when WWE tried to get into the whole big social media thing with the WWE app and fucking Tout, remember that fucking debacle? They were trying to force the narrative. And that's the thing, is with social media, you can't force a narrative on something where people can see in real time what's going on. But at the same time, you can't leave the barn doors open and expect the horse not to go freaking galloping out and wreck everything. So it's a double-edged sword, where because like remember when they were really, really, really fucking pushing the WWE app for like 2 years before the network, and how they would be like, you can vote on this match in real time on Raw, and it was such a fucking work, because they could obviously, it was they were able to manipulate the numbers any way they wanted. Why? Because Vince isn't going to let the fans decide on shit,
right?
Like not on the spur of the moment, because that's losing control of your product.
Right.
Ring of Honor, I think, could do it in a way, if they did the fan interaction stuff, where it would be like, here's a voting poll, it closes on X date, results will be released the following week. Send in, send us, YouTube videos, we can screen them, we'll put up the best ones. Like I said, do more contest oriented stuff.
Right. And I feel like with Ring of Honor, you have a lot more of a controlled environment, because, and this sounds like I might be putting down Ring of Honor, but it's really, from a business sense, it's not, because it makes things easier for them. You're not dealing on an international level where you're going to be dealing with millions upon millions of inputs.
Right.
You know, you're going to have enough of a control base where it can be handled, and I guess censored might not be the best word, but it's the best one I can think of right now. But it can be controlled enough to where it doesn't get crazy and out of control and lead to fucked up stuff happening within the company.
Exactly.
Okay. Now we get into, oh man. Actually, before I even get to that, let's just run through some talents, because obviously we've spent like the last 45 minutes talking about things from a corporate and business perspective.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm just going to run through some of the names we're talking about that were part of the personnel. Just give you an idea of the talent we're talking about here. And I'm not going to mention guys who were listed as wrestlers but were really behind the scenes people. We're talking strictly just wrestlers from this perspective.
Yeah.
Obviously, you have your world champion Bandito.
Mm-hmm.
You have Brody King and Chris Dickinson, Danhausen, Dragon Lee, who was their TV and one half their tag champs. Just had that whole thing between Vincent and Matt Taven end, and that whole storyline arc that happened, where Vinny had he had Dutch and was it Brian Johnson? I think.
Oh, what did I keep forgetting his name? I want to call him Vincent, but it's not Vincent.
Well, Marcellia was named Vincent, but he had Dutch.
No, like to do with the mustache.
Oh, right. But I want to say, wasn't Brian Johnson involved with that a little bit too?
Was he? I don't recall. Yeah,
I want to.
I kind of like didn't pay attention to those segments because I'm not big on Matt Taven or Vinny for that matter.
Obviously you have Homicide involved there. The Briscoes, Jay
Bateman.
Lethal.
Bateman
yeah. Bateman. That's right. Jonathan Gresham.
Mm-hmm.
Joe Hendry. Josh Woods was their pure champion. See what you want about, but Kenny King was there. Mark Haskins. It seemed like they were bringing. Yeah, it seemed like they were putting Taven and Bennett back together there to try and make Kingdom all over again.
Well, yeah, because they were calling them the OG Kingdom. Yeah, the OGK. Yeah.
I mean, just a ton of talent. Roosh, obviously, who was out on injury. Shane Taylor.
Silas Young, man.
Silas Young. Tracy Williams, and a whole bunch of others as well, and obviously all their female talents as well. Which you want to talk about? If you want to talk about one singular championship division that has been shot in the foot so many fucking times the last 5 years, it's Ring of Honor trying to establish a legitimate women's division. Like, what the fuck? Because you establish it with Sumi Sakai. The title eventually works its way to Kelly Klein. Whatever happens with Kelly Klein happens, and that basically stops everything. Then you try to reestablish it. You have a tournament. You crown a champion with a new face to a relatively new face to the company with Roxy, and then boom, you're shutting down the company for 3 to 4 months. And this is a company that was like, they weren't stockpiling it with like a ton of names like Impact has tried to do or AEW has tried to do. They were sticking with true indie root wrestlers, not including Chelsea Green or whatever Maria was doing behind the scenes. But like the list, I mean, really, when you take out the TNA run that she had, what has Angelina Love really done aside from her TNA run? Not a whole lot. And then you factored all these other girls, Jenny Rose, Mandy Leone, Maria Manic, Quinn McKay, Roxy, Session Moth Martina. I mean, these are all women who grew within the indie scenes, never got any big break, and were being given a platform to potentially grow a division in their form and likeness, and they just get shot in the foot all over again with the shutdown.
Yeah. In all honesty, I think the issue was because Ring of Honor could never really hold on to a grasp of that, was they really should have just formed, and obviously it can't happen now because Zach is with MLW. They should have formed a working relationship with Shimmer, where Shimmer's championship should have been sanctioned on ROH shows. And so they would have one or two female matches on an ROH show, and they would have implications with the Shimmer Women's Champion, and then the Shimmer Championship would be defended at the ROH big shows.
Yeah, I mean, ideally that would have been smart.
Yeah.
So obviously, there's the big elephant in the room that we'll get to regarding those releases. But before we get into that, I ran through a bunch of names there, and what it comes right down to is, there's also a number of those talents that are based out of the Northeast, notably the New England area, where you are. You've had a chance to work with a number of these talents in the past, whether it be in front of the camera or behind the scenes.
Yep.
And obviously one of the names I didn't bring up that I feel pretty bad for, just because I feel like he busted his nuts to get to where he was and had really carved out a niche for himself there, was Brian Malonis.
Oh yeah.
When you look at the list of people that, at least for now, are out of work in that scale, who are the names you immediately think of that you go, I mean, this is fucking like, obviously it sucks for everyone, but like, who are the names that you first thought of that you're like, Jesus Christ, like fucking really, like this is not good timing at all for them?
Like, as far as who do I think like is really asked out in the fucking wind?
Yeah.
Danhausen, Malonis.
Especially now that he broke his leg this weekend.
Danhausen broke his leg? See, had shit going on this weekend, couldn't tell.
Yeah. I'll go ahead and keep saying who you think, but I saw that I saw it on Twitter this morning.
Yeah. Malonis, Lethal. God, I love Jay. I've known Jay my entire career. Dalton Castle.
Do you think, while you're thinking of other names, let me bring up this question, because the fact that I saw Dalton already taking indie bookings made me kind of think of this. How far in advance do you think Sinclair and ROH gave their talent about this happening?
I don't think they gave him any notice.
Okay. The only reason I mentioned this is because Dalton had been, because I've known Dalton for a while, like you have. He had been kind of putting himself out there for any bookings a little more in recent weeks, which I thought that was kind of odd, and I wasn't sure if maybe that was just a contract thing for him. And then this news came out, I was like, oh, maybe he had a scoop that none of us knew about. I don't know. I just thought I'd throw that out there.
Yeah. Who else? Jesus. What was I gonna say? It just slipped my mind, but I was just like, because Brody King and Dickinson, because I don't know how everyone keeps missing the fucking boat on these two.
Oh my God, yeah! Don't even get me started. And the thing was, Brody. The one good thing for Brody, actually for Chris too, they both at least have the New Japan strong stuff to fall back on.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's not quite the same level, distribution wise per se, as Ring of Honor. but at least it's a brand name they have to fall back on. But I totally agree. I mean, Dickinson's another one where, and you'll go with this, like he just quality after quality after quality after quality, and then finally he gets that breakthrough. And yeah, I totally with you on Chris.
And along that line, Tony Deppen as well. Tony Deppen is like, as far as someone who is a proponent of doing things the right way in this business, like Tony Deppen, like how many people have fucking slept on him? And in all honesty, and it sucked because it was kind of their own issue that happened years ago, whether it is here nor there, whatever. The Briscoes. You know what the fuck are the Briscoes gonna do now?
Yeah, I mean,
unless they go to Japan, which I don't see them doing.
Yeah, that's I don't know, man. That's just so I don't know what show he worked this weekend. I might try to figure this out. But yeah, Danhausen, he put out a tweet with a picture of him, because originally I saw a video of him last night on Twitter where he was laying in a gurney in the hallway of an ER, and his one leg was like strapped to a board, and I was like, that can't be good. And then this morning he put out a tweet with a picture of him in a wheelchair, where he said he had a broken tibia and fibia. I'm trying to figure out what show this was out that it happened. He even put a picture of the X-ray showing the broken bones. Where the hell was this? Yeah, I'm not exactly sure, but anyways, so yeah, that's definitely not a good, not good, going forward, because obviously this now affects all the indie bookings that he had been picking up, with his extra exposure that he had been getting. So just rough all around in that regard. So now let's get into the elephant in the room. I think you know the elephant I'm about to bring up.
Okay.
So.
Oh yeah, that shit. I sent that to you.
not too long after this announcement came out, I want to say it was within 48 hours, roughly.
Yeah.
There was a report that came out that Tony Khan had talks with Ring of Honor and got approval from the company to sign the talents you see listed there. And if you're just listening to the show and not watching on YouTube, the talents are Jonathan Gresham, Jay Lethal, Dalton Castle, Brody King, Danhausen, that, again, fucked for Danhausen, Dragon Lee, EC3, because lols, the Briscoes, Roosh, and Bandito. So, and Roosh, another one who's on the shelf right now.
Right. And that's why I call bullshit on that, because there's no way, sight unseen, on a guy that we don't know when he's going to be able to compete again, whose primary language isn't English, is going to get a fucking contract with AEW sight unseen. I don't believe that for one moment.
Let's go beyond the Roosh part of it.
Okay.
Let's just keep things 100, because we always do on this show.
Mm-hmm.
The list is on our screen again.
Mm-hmm.
When you read those names, they don't scream AEW fan base.
Nope.
At least not 90% of those names.
Nope.
Now, Roosh and Bandito, maybe, because they have a style that could mix in with, say, just to name some talents. Be right. Lucha Brothers, the Bucks, Pac, the Seidels, Dante Martin, like their styles could mix well with those kinds of talents.
Yeah.
And obviously the cop out with Danhausen would be, oh, just put him with Sting and Darby.
Because
Now,
he has face paint.
exactly that.
Ugh.
Good, you're picking up what I'm putting down. But aside from that, nothing about EC3 screams AEW to me.
Nope.
Nothing about the Briscoes screams AEW to me.
The only thing I could see with Briscoes is because the Bucks have worked them so much in the past that they're like, oh, we can pull a match out of them. But then again, we've seen the Bucks and the Briscoes to death.
There's only one match I would ever want to see with the Briscoes, and then once it happens, I would like there would be no. The only match I'd really want to see would be the Briscoes versus FTR. After that, I just feel like
right, exactly.
And then, well, I forgot Dragon Lee. He would fit in with the Rush and Bandito crowd too.
Yeah,
but like Brody King, Dalton Castle, Jay Lethal, John Gresham, that does not scream AEW to me whatsoever.
Right.
Dalton's a little showy, so Dalton maybe, but like, no.
Dalton and Gresham would end up doing the job to guys on Dark. And that's because they don't like I said when I first sent that to you. It's like if this had an iota of truth, it would just further dilute the fucking roster and have a bunch of guys they don't know what to do with. And in all honesty, we know where Gresham's going to go. Gresham's going to go where his girl is. Like now that he's free of that shit.
Oh, I'd say there's an option B. True, you don't think MLW is a viable option B?
It could be, but MLW is getting kind of weird lately. But in the meantime,
you think? We'll get to that later.
But in the meantime, Gresham could be very well happy working the same schedule as his wife and working with his wife or wifey. I don't know if they're actually fully married, but
they are.
Yeah, okay, yeah, exactly. So that's a good fit for him. But people like Dalton, unfortunately, I see them getting stuck in the same format as. And say what you will about them, whether you like them or you don't, whether you like their style or you don't, their work rate you don't. But look at AEW from when they first started to now, and look at how Joey Janela and fucking Sonny Kiss have not been on an episode of Dynamite in 2 years. They're on Dark, and that's it.
Yeah, I think the only thing Joey, because Sonny hasn't been on TV at all.
Right, and Joey hasn't been on since Penelope started fucking Kip Sabian.
I think Joey was on TV once, but it was Rampage. I don't think it was Dynamite, but that was it.
Yeah. But those are two. Yeah. Those are two people that were there from the beginning, and they are more entertainment aspect than they are wrestling aspect. And they're just kind of thrown to the wayside. And that's I could see fucking Dalton being stuck working matches with Sonny for fucking the next freaking 18 months on Dark and Dark Elevation, which wouldn't be bad matches at all because they're both extremely talented, but ain't nobody going to see them.
Because they're on free streaming lulz. Right. Well, let's just address the big name out of that bunch.
Mm-hmm.
At least to me, the big name out of the bunch.
Mm-hmm.
Let's address Jay Lethal.
Yeah.
Because whether anybody wants to fucking admit it or not, Jay Lethal was the heartbeat of Ring of Honor.
Yep.
He's their heart and soul.
Yep.
Aside from obviously any bookings he picks up on the independents.
Yeah.
Do you think Jay is loyal enough to wait things out until April?
I do.
I think so too.
Picking up indie bookings, Jay can get what he charges because he deserves it. And honestly, Jay has always been one of the most level-headed people when it comes to how much he charges for bookings.
That's an understatement.
So, yeah, I think he waits it out.
Yeah. Honestly, I think because here's the other part of it with EC3 that I'm going to bring up quick. The reason I'm going to say him and Impact makes a lot more sense than I know, but here's the reason why I think EC3 and Impact makes a lot more sense than EC3 and AEW. Is because despite the this isn't me trying to. I wasn't trying to use a phrase that is linked to EC3 recently, but it's the only word I can think of. Despite the narrative that's out there about AEW, just constantly picking up recently dropped WWE talent, I don't think Braun Strowman really fits into the AEW mold.
Right.
And if Braun, Adam, whatever the fuck you want to call him, if he's really gonna make a comeback to the ring, and it's really not gonna be WWE because of the stuff that he's been linked to with EC3 recently,
Mm-hmm.
Impact is the only place that I think makes any sense, and because of that, that's why I think you bring him and EC3 in together. Because let's just put it this way: EC3 alone, not gonna work.
Nope.
He needs to come back with somebody by his side.
Yep.
And the best way to do that would be with a monster or somebody like, especially if you're gonna do something really stupid that I think Impact might do, and that's try to put EC3 immediately into the title picture. You need somebody that can stand next to Morrissey and not look like a midget.
Yep.
And the person that makes sense there would be Braun.
Yeah.
And we'll get to the Impact title picture later.
Right. EC3 just isn't a draw at all.
Right. And we'll get to that fucking title picture because we'll get to that.
Yeah.
Now we just keep finding different elephants in the room. We're just going to each corner of the room and finding a different elephant to address.
Right.
This is one that I want to shoot down right now. Actually, you know what? No. Different one. We're going to the baby elephant next to the adult elephant. Let's go to the baby elephant. Because Joe Koff has been interviewed since this statement came out.
Mm-hmm.
And his answer to this didn't shock me. But I want to ask you. I'm going to actually phrase it as a trivia question. If you had to name off the biggest regret / worst business decision Ring of Honor made the last 3 years, what do you think it was?
That's a good question.
Because Joe Koff alluded to what he thinks it was.
Did he think it was the MSG show?
Nope.
No.
I think that would have been quite the opposite. I think that would have been one of their best business decisions of the last.
I agree, but because there was something about that I wanted to get to later, so I'll just put that on the back burner.
But you're on the right track with that, just so you know. Your brain is working correctly, but it's just keep. I'll give you one more guess.
I'm not sure. Like working the relationship with CMLL?
No.
No.
I'm going to say it, and you're going to kick yourself for not saying this. The fact that Ring of Honor backed All In.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I was actually going to talk about that when we got to the tape library talking about it. But yes, I agree. Yeah.
Man. You want to talk about getting bent over a knee and taking it in the ass. Because, like, financially, I don't know the ins and outs of how that worked out as far as what revenue Joe got and Ring of Honor got. But that's not even part of the conversation. The conversation is Kenny, the Jacksons, Cody, they basically took complete advantage of their popularity and positioning within the business at the time. Got Joe to back a completely independent show.
Right, so they could get their production value and their distribution and all that shit.
Correct. And then essentially use that as a for lack of a better phrase, as their tape to sell themselves.
Yep.
And they eventually found Tony Khan
Tony Khan.
because he happened to
Right.
show up at the New Japan shows in California that summer and whatever.
Right. And I remember when all that shit was going down, everyone was like, "Oh my god, they did this all by themselves." I'm like, no, they fucking didn't. They had the fucking juggernaut that was Sinclair Broadcasting behind it. And no one wanted to fucking fess up to it at the time.
Well, didn't they? I mean, it should have been pretty obvious because didn't they use? I don't think they used all of them, but I think they at least used Ian Riccaboni for that show, didn't they?
They used Ian Riccaboni. They had Jay come out with the ROH title. They were using
Right.
They were using ROH feuds in that show.
Yeah.
Like, it was so fucking obvious. Kerry Silkin, dude, that was the big thing, was they sold out a 23,000 seat arena, blah blah blah, or no, 12,000, and blah 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 blah. Yeah, no, the week of, Kerry Silkin was giving away fistfuls of tickets on his social media. You know me, hit me up. You want tickets? I have them. I will give them to you, because
yeah,
there were
yeah.
empty sections.
I saw that. Yeah. Oh man, I'm just.
But no one wants to admit that.
I don't know. I'm just. Like I saw that quote, and I kind of had to laugh at it because it was one of those things where I don't know, things just seemed. That was really the beginning of the wool being pulled over the eyes of that niche crowd, essentially.
Exactly, because All In should have been what Super Clash should have been, where it was companies coming together and having a show for the fans. And that was why you had the ROH champion on it. You had the NWA championship being featured on it. You had this, that, the other thing. And that's what it should have been. It should have been looked at as Super Clash. It should not have been looked at as these four fucking yahoos who are marks for themselves pulled off the greatest scheme of all time, because that's to this day what people still fucking think of it as. The only benefit that they got out of that was that All In is actually part of the Ring of Honor tape library.
So what was the point you wanted to bring up about the tape library before we move on?
So that was the thing, was because it's been going back and forth. Apparently, because there was conflicting sources back and forth going on about this with the news of the 3-month shutdown, is the Ring of Honor tape library has been for sale for over a year. Yeah. And there's been no buyers. And now when you consider the fact that fucking cokehead Rick Moranis is talking about an AEW streaming service. And,
cokehead Rick Moranis.
Yeah. And there really isn't that much AEW stuff to support a streaming channel.
You're about to go towards the direction I was going to go with the other elephant in the room.
There's an entire Ring of Honor fucking tape library that's Sinclair Media. And this is what I didn't really, this is the one thing that I was happy about, but then it was sad about right afterwards, was when Sinclair first took control of Ring of Honor, there was a giant fucking DVD sale on Ring of Honor's site. And I took full advantage of that because I was a huge fan of the Ring of Honor Straight Shooting series and the Secrets of the Ring series. And I was able to buy up as many of those DVDs I could for $4 a piece. Mm-hmm. And so I still have a ton of Ring of Honor Straight Shooting DVDs and Secrets of the Ring. Those were great. The physical shows, I have DVDs of a handful of the shows I was at, because I had a good time at the shows, and I have that memory. Mm-hmm. But they had this tape library that they just got rid of all the physical copies, and then they did nothing with the shit afterwards. Like, Ring of Honor had Honor Club, like, as far as online shit, but they had this giant tape library that they're like Sinclair Media was just like, they got the same mentality as so many other things, where like physical media is a dying art form and everything's going to streaming. But in the meantime, you've got all this shit where you could have had a Ring of Honor streaming fucking streaming channel for how fucking long, because you literally have 20 years worth of material.
Yeah.
And you've got the only way to fucking find some of this shit now is to fucking illegally torrent shit from fucking indie wrestling torrent fucking trading sites and shit. And there is so much shit that was like that were like staples of the Ring of Honor timeline of big shit that happened that you can't find anywhere. Go ahead and try to find video footage of the beginning of the Age of the Fall. You can't find it. I had to search because the one night when Seth Rollins first started doing the Drip God gimmick and he came out in the white jacket with the red on it, and we were like, he's doing Age of the Fall. And we tried searching for, you couldn't find shit. You couldn't find even still pics, let alone video of the night where they fucking jacked up Briscoe and had fucking Jimmy Jacobs standing underneath with the blood coming down on him and all that shit. You can't find it anywhere. Fucking the entire CM Punk Raven feud. Unless you've got the old DVDs, you ain't got it nowhere. The first Clockwork Orange House of Fun. Yep. Unless you were there, you ain't got shit. Fucking the entire Summer of Punk. The fucking Scramble Cage. Everything. Just I could go off for fucking hours. But they've been sitting on this shit and they've had it for sale for a fucking year.
Listen. Nothing would do my heart better at this point because I didn't get to watch any of his stuff because I didn't get into Ring of Honor until much later down the road. Yeah. Nothing would do my heart better than to be able to sit down, pull up a streaming service, and just binge watch everything Nigel McGuinness did in Ring of Honor.
Absolutely.
I would fucking kill to do that, but you can't. And I'm sure that's a big chunk of what they got. And that's just me focusing on one guy. You could bring up Bryan Danielson, obviously.
Even the stuff AJ did back in Ring of Honor.
Yeah. I mean, there's a whole bunch of shit.
Because like one of the DVDs I have that got damaged that I wish I could replace was I had the fucking DVD of the night where they crowned the first Pure Champion, where it was the Pure Championship title tournament, and that entire fucking show was a banger, and the finals was fucking Punk and AJ in a fucking classic.
Yep. It's funny that you mentioned the tape library. Because that goes down a dark road I'm not sure we want to go down, but we have to go down it because people want to say this is going to happen, even though I know it's not going to. Or at least I hope it's not going to. Oh, man. There is talk going around right now. I'm not sure if it's viable talk, but it's talk. That maybe... possibly, hopefully not. Your coked out Rick Moranis friend could potentially have interest in buying out the company from Sinclair and using it as
developmental.
Essentially.
Sinclair won't sell the company. And I will tell you why. It's because I was at a seminar, I want to say 3 years ago, maybe 4. It was when Test of Strength Wrestling School was still in Watertown near my old house. And I was going down there to help out training the kids on promo class and everything. And it was, Wagner actually had Bob Evans come in for one of the Hangs with Bob seminars. And Bob sat there, and one of the things someone mentioned was Vince possibly buying Ring of Honor. And Bob Evans said something with me that resoluted since then. The what do you call it? The kept resounding was
resonated.
He said Sinclair resonated, not resoluted. Resonated. Yes, thank you. Bob Evans said Ring of Honor. What do you call it? He says Sinclair Media makes more in 1 quarter than Vince McMahon has. Than Vince McMahon makes in a year, or something to that effect. Basically, Sinclair has more money than God, and they own this asset, and unless they get some insane amount offered, they're not going to let go of it. And that's why, like, Sinclair very much could have said, we're selling Ring of Honor. They could have said that right off the bat. Sinclair's holding on to it. They're like, we're going to revamp it. We're going to do something else with it, but they're not going to let it go. So Tony Khan can fucking hem and haw all he wants and throw some insane numbers at them. But at the end of the day, Sinclair's going to keep holding on to it. And I'm pretty sure that's why that the tape library has not been bought by anyone, because I guarantee there is a laundry list of stipulations that goes with that tape library.
Oh, I'm sure. And I'm glad you said all that and you told that story, because I feel like that was an innate fear that some ROH fans might have had. Mm-hmm. Just because, I mean, wrestling fans in general, because they all saw what happened with ECW, they all saw what happened with WCW. They all saw what happened. I mean, not all, but like the really old school fans remember everything about WWE buying out all the territories back in the 80s and 90s.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, it's reassuring to know that there hasn't been any statement from Sinclair saying we're out.
Right.
But because to me, and you'll agree with this, I think, a non-statement is a good statement.
Yes.
Like Sinclair not coming out with any kind of quote, because to me, here are the reactions you would get. If Sinclair put out a quote saying, yes, they're for sale, then obviously all the rumors are going fucking bananas.
Right.
If Sinclair puts out a quote reassuring they're not going to sell, people still are going to come out and be like, oh my God, this is all just for show. They're trying to sell the company. It's a lose-lose situation if you say anything, no matter what direction you're going in. Yeah. So Sinclair not putting out anything, to me, is the best sign possible for no sale being possible. Exactly. So I'm in agreement with you. It was just one of those things where I had to bring it up because we wouldn't be doing our jobs properly on this show if we didn't bring it up. So yeah, that's that. So I guess the question just becomes now to kind of put a bow on this end of things with Ring of Honor going on hiatus for a few months. How do we view this in the end? Like, obviously, it sucks for the talent and their core fan base in the short term. But long term, I almost feel like this, as long as things are executed properly out of the gate the first 3 to 6 months back, I feel like long term, this break could be looked at as a huge W for the company. Because when you look at the way things have gone, and this is something kind of addressed in recent episodes with New Japan. You look at post Kenny, Bucks, Cody, and that whole mess. You basically look post All In and AEW being created. Ring of Honor did a solid job of not just saying fuck it. But at the same time, I feel like there was a slight loss of eyeballs and a little disjointed storytelling at times, which is something I know we've brought up with New Japan. And I feel like this, the best way for me to put it is kind of compare it to, and then this is a totally dumb thing to compare it to, but it's the only thing that came to my mind. Have you seen those commercials at all for this Subway refresh with these new breads and new ingredients they've got for their subs?
Yeah.
It's kind of reminded me of that. It's just a way for them to say, hey, we're still the same company with the same core beliefs. We're just tweaking a few things here and there just to kind of give it a new taste and a new look.
And we keep cutting people off.
And it's just, To me, I feel like it's just a. Yeah, sorry, I totally went over my head for a second there.
I'm in a subway. What?
Right. Um, basically, I feel like. Okay, here's a better comparison. I feel like ROH is kind of going to go down the NXT 2.0 route.
Yes.
But they can prove that they can do it better because they've taken the time to stop and hit the reset button instead of trying to do it simultaneously while dealing with the talents that are on your fringe of being pushed or are just going to get pushed out.
Right. And in all honesty, a friend of mine was saying something recently, like especially when this Ring of Honor news hit, but he had said it in the past. He said that he thinks that pro wrestling as a whole could benefit from an off season. And this could be the litmus test that's been needed. I mean, obviously WWE is never going to do that because of the records they hold for television. But everywhere else, every hit TV series has an off season. Like every sport has an off season. Except wrestling. Maybe it's what it needs.
This is what I'm about to bring up is dumb, but you say that and I find it hilarious. Could you imagine if Vince was holding a meeting in Stamford and he's like, God damn it, I need new ideas for our business model. And I'll just throw out a random name here. Let's say Pat Buck. Because I'm pretty sure he's still working behind the scenes in WWE, correct?
Yeah. Yep.
Let's just say Pat Buck is in this meeting and he goes, Vince, I think maybe we should change the structuring of our calendar. Vince goes, the fuck do you mean? What if we split the year into 4 quarters and took a week off between each quarter? 12-week quarters with a week in between each. Like it's a fucking school year.
I can just see Vince exploding.
Get the fuck out! You're fired! He wouldn't even give it a thought. He'd be like, get out.
Right.
Oh, Christ. But I mean, hypothetically, in a world far, far away, hypothetically, you're not off base by saying that. Like,
right.
Because it's go right now. Like, maybe taking a week off here and there wouldn't be a horrible thing.
In all honesty, look at NXT the past few years, like pre-pandemic NXT. If you would notice, they would have they would go, but in December they would do They would do the War Games takeover, and then throughout December there would be like some of the stuff that they taped at the War Games takeover to take them through 2 weeks, and then they would do a recap. They would do like a recap show, and then they would do the best of NXT. So they were technically off for the month of December.
Yep.
And that really helped them keep going.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, again, in a perfect world, that makes complete fucking sense. In a wrestling world led by Vincent Kennedy McMahon, not a fucking chance. But any hooser. All right. So, like I thought, we did go extremely long form on Ring of Honor, which again, noteworthy topic, was worth it. So here's what we're going to do. We're gonna take a timeout and call this part 1 of episode 23, and then we'll get right back into it, and we'll get to part B. So if you're watching on YouTube, click next on your playlist And same thing goes, I assume, if you're listening on Google Play or Apple Podcasts or Spotify, just to hit the old next button on your playlist for part 2, episode 23 of White Heat. We'll catch you in a minute.
All right.